Welcome, you're watching Vox News, your daily evening news with Rita Kamkumo. Our headlines today: South Africa's main opposition party is taking legal action to void lockdown rules decreed by the government. Lesotho's Prime Minister Tom Thabane may be sacked if he doesn't quit by the 22nd of May. Anti-lockdown protesters in Guinea reopened mosques by force after a deadly demonstration earlier this week. Our top story today: political tensions are escalating in South Africa. The main opposition party decided to take legal action this Friday to challenge the legality of measures imposed by the government to fight against the coronavirus pandemic that it considers to be undemocratic and dangerous for the economy. In its complaint, the Democratic Alliance particularly questions the rationality of the nighttime curfew, the ban on e-commerce, and the limitations of sport, and more generally deplores the lack of Parliament's control over the executive under the state of emergency. The leader of the party, Johnson Houston, announced that he will file papers in the High Court in Pretoria today to end the lockdown, which he says destroys thousands of businesses and millions of jobs. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced on Wednesday a further easing of the 7-week lockdown to allow more activity to resume in economic sectors. In Lesotho, Prime Minister Thomas Thabane is still in office despite his announcement to the AFP claiming that he will submit his resignation to King Leslie III on Wednesday. However, his party said on Thursday that he could be removed from office by the king if he does not resign before the date set in Parliament for the inauguration of his successor on the 22nd of May. The embattled Prime Minister is accused of being involved in the murder of his ex-wife in 2017. These accusations, that the Prime Minister denies, triggered a political crisis in the country and the formation of a new administration. Parliament is due to meet on the 22nd of May to approve the appointment of a new Prime Minister, the current Finance Minister, Mokwetsi Majoro. The Prime Minister's failure to step down on Wednesday provoked many reactions, including among political analysts who believe Tom Thabane will try to protect his own interests.
Today we heard that the Prime Minister was supposed to have tendered his resignation to His Majesty. He hasn't done that by the look of things. Of course, it is to be expected because this is conflict, right? This cannot be a smooth process by any stretch.
80-year-old Tom Thabane, in power since 2017, remains under threat of prosecution for the murder of his ex-wife 3 years ago. His second wife, 43-year-old Messiah Thabane, has already been indicted in this case.
The Prime Minister, like any politician, will try to protect his own interests, as it were. Right? And those interests are that he may want to rule from the grave, leave people in key positions so that he will be able to control them while he's not in Parliament, when he's not in government, and also to protect his wife, right, who is facing serious charges.
I think that he's got very little room to maneuver. It happens that you can maneuver yourself so much that ultimately you find yourself in a corner. And I think that's where the current Prime Minister finds himself. I think that the amendment to the Constitution, the 9th Amendment, made it very difficult for him to squirm out of the current situation. So I think he'll step down.
The head of government, who has always denied any involvement in the murder of his ex-wife, said on Tuesday that he is ready to step down and that he is still working on a few details to ensure a smooth retirement. In Togo, in view of the coronavirus pandemic, the opposition movement represented by former Prime Minister Agbeyome Kodjo demanded on Thursday the immediate release of its 16 activists detained in Lomé Civil Prison, the country's largest jail. 11 of the 16 members of the Patriotic Movement for Democracy and Development were transferred to the police station to be tested for COVID-19 after authorities detected about 20 positive new cases last Friday. Earlier this week, the prisoners of Lomé's biggest prison protested, demanding to be released or transferred to other prison centers, as they were worried about the spread of the coronavirus. The Lomé Civil Prison, which was built to house 660 detainees, currently accommodates 1,400 prisoners. In Burundi, following the government's decision to expel the entire World Health Organization team in charge of the coronavirus pandemic response from the country by this Friday, the United Nations agency has not failed to react.
We are in communication with the government of Burundi to clarify and understand the reasoning behind this decision they have taken. And we are in the meantime then working with the UN system in the country to organize the departure of our staff.
The note sent earlier this week by the head of Burundian diplomacy to the Office of the World Health Organization demanded the expulsion of the organization's representative in Burundi, Mr. Walter Kazadi Mulumbo, and that of the 3 members of his bureau.
The representative, Dr. Walter Kazadi Mulumbo, is a long-standing, well-respected staff member of WHO, extremely competent person, who is also a good leader and manager. We remain very willing to continue to collaborate with Burundi as a member state of WHO in the African region, and most importantly, to support not only their response to this COVID-19 pandemic and help to minimize illness and death among Burundian people, but also to continue to work with the country on the many other health problems and programs on which we have been collaborating with Burundi.
A month ago, Mr. Mulumbo and his team members had barely escaped expulsion from the Burundian territory after the government had criticized them for their interference in its handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Guinea, the virus lockdown order decreed by the government escalated into deadly protests across several cities and the reopening of places of worship by force. In the country, where about 80% of the population is of the Muslim faith, anti-lockdown protesters forced open several mosques that had been closed since late March on Wednesday in the cities of Kamsar and Dubreka, according to local officials.
These groups are formed. The mosques that were closed by a government decision to prevent the spread, they went to break the doors of all the mosques in Koya to make people pray because of the establishment of the lockdown. Does their need for the lockdown to be removed at such a stage mean that people should be burning down police stations, destroying what little property we have, or hard-earned infrastructure?
The reopening of mosques by protesters came a day after 7 people were killed and many injured in clashes between protesters and the police over frequent power cuts and roadblocks set up during the coronavirus pandemic.
The man who shot her was at point-blank range because there was not even 10 meters between them. And it was not only a soldier who was in civilian clothes, he hid his weapon under his bavou. The soldier killed my wife directly. The bullet entered here, the bullet exited here. She left 4 children with me.
Guinea's Secretary of State for Religious Affairs, Jamal Bangoura, called for calm and restraint, specifying that places of worship had been closed as part of the fight against the virus. In Senegal, following the Catholic Church's decision to maintain the suspension of collective prayers, the Imam of the Dakar Grand Mosque announced on Thursday that prayers remain suspended due to the persistence of the health risk, despite President Macky Sall's approval of the reopening of places of worship. The Imam pointed out that the number of cases of coronavirus contamination is growing steadily and that the reasons for the closure of mosques remain more valid today than ever. In Senegal, where over 90% of the population is Muslim, 90% of people visit the Dakar Grand Mosque at the time of the great religious festivals. Besides, another famous mosque in the capital, the Omani Mosque, will also remain closed until further notice. The country has officially recorded 2,189 cases of virus contamination, including 842 recoveries. Just like Senegal, the Ivorian government also began to ease some of its restrictive measures to combat the coronavirus pandemic. In the country's capital, Abidjan, the authorities announced this Friday the lifting of the curfew and the reopening of its well-known bars and restaurants called Maki, to the delight of Maki owners who generate economic activity. However, performance venues, cinemas and nightclubs will remain closed until the 31st of May in Abidjan and its region, which has 1/5 of the country's population. The state of emergency is maintained and borders remain closed. the isolation of the Abidjan region from the rest of the country is also maintained. In Namibia, President H. Gangop announced on Thursday to his ministers and senior officials that no new vehicle will be ordered for members of the government and its officials until 2025 to channel funds into combating the coronavirus. Namibian deputies and ministers each qualify for Mercedes-Benz vehicle upon their appointment. This 5-year ban on renewing executive cars will allow the country to reduce public spending by $200 million Namibian dollars, or $13.4 million US dollars. The money will be directed towards urgent priorities, specifically at a time when the country is dealing with the health and economic implications of COVID-19. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, despite the coronavirus pandemic, health authorities in the North Kivu province announced on Thursday their decision to restart the countdown to the end of the Ebola epidemic in the east of the country, even though one Ebola patient escaped, according to the Ministry of Health of North Kivu. The provincial government, in collaboration with the General Coordination of the Ebola Response, began the countdown yesterday for 42 days. This 42-day period is twice the maximum average incubation time of the virus. However, the authorities call for vigilance, knowing that one of the Ebola cases escaped. Finally, in Egypt, a 26-year-old professional lion tamer is entertaining his fellow citizens over the lockdown period through live-streamed performances broadcasted on social media from his Cairo living room.
All activities are altered and people feel bored because of the coronavirus lockdown. The idea behind the performances at home is to entertain people and myself and to encourage people to stay home and not go out.
Egypt has closed its entertainment venues, including circuses, to stem the progression of the coronavirus, forcing Ashraf Alud and his famous family into a rethink.
I am not scared of the lions at all. I've been living with them since I was a baby. I'm familiar with their behaviors and temperaments. I love them dearly.
The family now hopes to use the videos posted on social media to earn back the lost revenue over the lockdown period. That's it for today. Thank you for watching Vox News.